Okay, we're out here with Cassie again, and we're gonna go over our about turns and U-turns and start working on our loose leash walking skills. So I'm gonna go ahead and call him into heel here, heel. And we do want that to have an implied stay. So we are taking the food out of this just a little bit. So I'm using, okay, I'm gonna release you for a second. I wanna make sure that throughout this process that I am thinking about using the leash as a communication extension of me, an extension of how I communicate with Cassian. So I want to avoid using the leash to physically move him around or prevent him from doing things if I can. So I actually just want to make sure that any pressure that he's feeling is just communicating that he needs to change or fix something. So it's very nuanced, but I want to make sure that that's kind of what I've got in my head as I do these exercises. So I'm going to say heel. I'm going to guide him with the leash. And when I'm guiding with the leash, yeah, I'm using pressure anytime I want him to change, and I'm releasing it as soon as he starts to move. So right here where he's kind of stuck, he's not quite in that heel position that we're looking for. Good. I'm going to use pressure and some kissy sounds. Good. And I don't want to perfect, there we go. Good. So hopefully you could see where pressure was happening when I needed him to change or fix that, and it's loose when he's correct. We're going to start to Good. Good. Oh, that was actually pretty good. This is good. We don't want to get too nitpicky about the position when we're not, for the first time we're doing this, and where I do have food, but I'm not going to try to use food to fix him for that. So we're going to talk about the first turn, which is going to be the about turn. And that one is kind of good for dogs that tend to get out ahead. This is the turn that you're going to make to go to the right when your dog's on the left-hand side. So we're going to remind him to heel. Again, that's really the only time I want to repeat my command. I am going to get my food ready, and I'm going to just basically turn away from him and feed him for catching up. So we'll do this on heading this way as well. So I'm going to make my turn and have my food at the side, right at the seam of my pants to make sure that he ends up there. Because the biggest problem that happens when we make turns is sometimes the dog ends up too far behind us and shows up on the other side. So we want to make sure that he's ending up right here. So I'm going to turn away and pay him right here at the side of my body. The other turn we're going to talk about, good, because you're still in heel. Good. Good. Is the U-turn. So the way that I differentiate about turn, U-turn, I remember U-turn is you turning in to your dog. Good. Good. Good boy. So I'm going to have that food, and I'm going to make my turn. And when I'm ready to make my turn, I'm going to have my food here as almost like a stop sign. I'm going to do my turn and feed once I've completed it. All right, so my food comes down. I turn into my dog. I'm going to feed right here after I complete that turn. All right, so now that he's done a couple of these and he did really good with that, I feel pretty comfortable with moving the food out of it just a little bit. And I'm just going to pay him after. And we do need to work through him tolerating or coping with me getting food out and having food on this side of my body or my treat pouch and not having him break position. He's doing better with that, but that's just something we're working on. So we're going to go ahead and do the about turn. See right there where he went on the other side? Whoopsie. So we're going to try that again. I'm going to turn. Okay, so we're going to help him through this. Good. There we go. I have my food ready. Make my turn. Good. He needs a little bit of help with that turn. I'll do one more. Good. Yes, sir. Good boy. All right. And so now we're going to do our U-turn with less of a food lure. Good. Good. So U-turns are helpful to help your dog kind of yield to your body pressure. So he has to kind of yield to my body and get out of my way. Good. And I would say as you get practicing this for the human end, good. For the human end of the leash, I want to make sure that I'm always feeding him kind of with my forearm almost glued to my side. That will help keep him in tight and slightly behind us, which is where we want him. Good boy. Whoops, you blew it. And then the other thing I personally would work on is just making sure I'm not feeding him for scooching out. So where I was going to feed him for being in that nice little stable sit in the heel position like this is ideal if he were to maintain that while I'm moving around and walking and or not walking, but talking and fidgeting with my treat pouch. Good. That's what I want to reinforce him for. If he starts to fidget and move around, I'm just going to fix it and move on and not feed him. Heel. Good. Here's our about turn. Yes, good boy. And our U-turn. Good. And see how when we did that U-turn, he was a little bit out ahead, but when I had my food where I don't want to meet him. Good. Okay. So I don't want to meet him there. If I make that U-turn and he ends up out in front of me, I want to make sure I'm maintaining that food lure right here. That'll kind of just help give him some muscle memory of where to end up. He's doing very good with that. I have the intention to add on a little snippet of a session we just did with another dog, Bristol, where he kind of like got a little reactive when he first saw her. And we kind of worked through that just a little bit, but I did notice like there's like an element of frustration in there where he's like, oh, that's so exciting. I saw my friend, and I kind of had a little reaction. We fixed it. We moved on, but he was still kind of, you can tell he still felt that like the frustration of not being able to release that feeling of excitement. It kind of got bottled up, I think, and it turned into reacting, barking. And then afterwards, again, that like frustration was still, I think, in his system, and he was like nipping and jumping up and biting my hand, biting the leash, biting things on the ground. So not necessarily something I would correct in that I just basically was like, oh, no, thank you. We're not doing that. Using some leash pressure and that was fine, and that worked to like stop him in the moment. But when I see that, that's lending itself to that train of thought that we'd already discussed about him needing an outlet for that like reactionary behavior. So I think that RC car thing is going to be really cool. I'm really excited to like dive into that and give him a little bit of an outlet, so that when it's not to say that will prevent that from happening at all, and we would most likely still see it happening, but it's going to be very much easier to correct, and that leftover frustration is going to be less likely to bubble up afterwards. He's going to be much more inclined to let things go and be like, oh, okay. So yeah, that's really exciting. I think that's going to be good for him, but he's doing great. Good job, Cassie.